25 years is how long we've been chasing the shadows and fragments of the Void Century. Back in Alabasta, when Robin first mentioned this 100-year gap in history, a lot of us probably thought that it was just another mystery Oda would address eventually, but none of us had any idea that it would become one of the main structural pillars holding up the story of One Piece. Here in 2025, the floodgates have opened. Vegapunk's broadcast didn't just confirm the existence of the Void Century, it had told the entire world that sea levels rose 200 meters during that period, that ancient weapons caused it, and that the same catastrophe might be coming again. The Elbaph arc gave us the Harley text, ancient writings that describe not just the Void Century, but the world that came before it. Slowly, the entire picture of the Void Century is becoming clear, and it's more complicated and tragic than anyone would have expected. This retrospective video is going to examine everything that we actually know about the Void Century based on what Oda has revealed within the manga. Hopefully this video will help us to appreciate the gaps that still exist and why those gaps matter. We'll be looking at how Oda has systematically revealed a lot of the information about the Void Century across the different arcs of the series, why certain details were held back for decades, and how the final saga is forcing all of these narrative threads to converge. The Void Century is central to the existence of the world government as an authoritarian regime. It's why certain races were nearly driven to the point of extinction, and it's why Roger laughed at Laugh-Tale. Everything within One Piece, from the Devil Fruits to the Grand Line's bizarre geography, it traces back to decisions that were made during these 100 years that someone desperately had wanted to erase. Let's first establish the foundations before we start building anything on it with theories. The Void Century spans from approximately 900 to 800 years before the current timeline. We know this from Professor Clover's research in Ohara, which Robin had confirmed. Every scrap of archaeological evidence from this period has been destroyed, and researching it is actually punishable by death. From chapters 391 to 397 from Ohara, a 100-year gap exists in recorded history. The world government was formed 800 years ago at the end of this period. An ancient kingdom existed that opposed the 20 kingdoms that would become the world government. The kingdom had a name, but we don't know what it is. This kingdom was so threatening that its very existence justified its destruction. Then from chapters 301 to 302 from the Skypiea arc, the Poneglyphs were created during or immediately after the Void Century. They're written in an ancient language almost nobody can read. Shandora was protecting a Poneglyph 800 years ago when it was attacked. From Fishman Island, chapter 649, we learn that Joy Boy existed during the Void Century. He made a promise to the ancient mermaid princess who was Poseidon. He failed to keep that promise and apologized via a Poneglyph. The Noah has been waiting at Fishman Island for apparently the appointed time. Then from the Dressrosa arc and the Zoa arc, spanning from chapters 761 to 822, we learn that the Kozuki clan of Wano created the Poneglyphs. There are 30 in total, 9 are historical, 4 are road Poneglyphs, and the rest are informational. The voice of all things is connected to reading the true history of the world, and Zunisha has been walking for over 1,000 years due to a crime committed during the Void Century. Then from the Whole Cake Island arc and Wano, spanning chapters 967 to 972 and chapter 1115, we learn that Roger reached Laugh-Tale and learned the complete truth. He laughed because of what he found there. Roger said they arrived too early. The ancient kingdom was highly technologically advanced. Pluton is sealed beneath Wano, and opening Wano's borders is connected to releasing Pluton. We also learn Void Century information from Egghead in chapters 1113 to 1115. We found out sea levels rose by 200 meters during the Void Century. This couldn't have been natural. The ancient weapons must have caused it. The continents from before the Void Century are now underwater. Current islands appear to be the mountain tops of sunken landmasses. The ancient weapons are still functional, and the war hasn't ended yet. Joy Boy was born in the ancient kingdom 900 years ago, and he is dubbed as the first ever pirate who wielded the Nika fruit. Void Century information was revealed in the Elbaph arc from chapters 1135 to 1138. We learned about the Harley text, which described 3 historical periods. The first world was a technologically advanced civilization that existed before the Void Century. The Mother Flame existed in ancient times and it was rediscovered. Devil fruits were created during the Void Century by something called the Forest God. Multiple godlike entities are referenced here, like the Sun God, Earth God, Forest God, and the Sea God. The D-Clan and Lunarians shared a dream during the Void Century. The prophecy says that the sun will return and those men will finally meet again. This is pretty much the confirmed Void Century information that we have. Everything else, and there's a lot of this, is interpretation, educated guesses, or outright fan speculation. The problem with most Void Century discussions is that they blur the line between what Oda has shown us and what the community has theorized and has accepted as headcanons, so I'll explicitly separate the facts from the fan theories. Let's start with the erasure of this period of time. So the world government didn't just hide the Void Century, they executed the most comprehensive information suppression campaign in history, and we can track exactly how they did it because Oda has shown us their methods repeatedly in the story. The first method is the criminalization of knowledge. Researching the Void Century isn't illegal because it's dangerous, it's illegal because knowledge itself is dangerous to the government's legitimacy. When the Ohara scholars began studying the ancient texts, CP9 didn't arrest them for possessing weapons or planning rebellion. They arrested them for reading. Spandine's orders were clear: anyone who can read poneglyphs must die. The 5 elders explained their reasoning during the Ohara flashback. They claimed that the scholars might revive the ancient weapons, but Clover's research hadn't even reached the weapons yet. He was still trying to understand what the ancient kingdom was. The real fear of the government was simple. If people learned about a powerful, prosperous kingdom that existed prior to the world government, they might question whether if the government's version of history is true. The second method is physical destruction. Ohara's destruction is the template for this. A Buster Call erases an island so thoroughly that future generations won't even know that something existed there. When a Buster Call was done on Ohara, the island burned, including its library, tree of knowledge, and every scholar who could read the ancient language, who had died except for Robin, who had survived by accident. Ohara wasn't the first time. Shandora was attacked 800 years ago during the Void Century's end. The city fell, but it wasn't completely destroyed, which is why the Poneglyph survived. The Shandia spent 8 centuries protecting those ruins, fighting off anyone who tried to reach the stone. Their cultural memory preserved a truth that the government wanted buried, that their ancestors fought against the alliance that became the world government. The third method the world government uses is controlling the historical narrative. Every child within the One Piece world learns the same sanitized history. 20 kingdoms formed an alliance to bring peace to a chaotic world. They created the world government to protect humanity. The founding families became the Celestial Dragons, and their descendants govern wisely from Merijo. That's the official story taught in every school and written within most textbooks. Nobody learns about the kingdom that was destroyed. Nobody learns that the 20 kingdoms fought a war of annihilation against opponents the government refuses to name. The historical record simply begins 800 years ago with the world government's formation. Everything before that is lost to time according to official sources. The fourth method is the elimination of witnesses. The government hunts down anyone connected to the Void Century's truth. Robin has been running since she was 8 years old because she can read poneglyphs. The Kozuki clan was nearly wiped out. The Lunarians were reduced to one known survivor, and the Buccaneers were systematically eliminated. These weren't random genocides. They were strategic removals of people who might remember or pass down information. One of the more chilling examples is how casually the government discusses all of this. When Saturn talked about eliminating bloodlines at Egghead, he was being practical. From the government's perspective, information is hereditary. If you kill everyone who knows something, then that something stops existing. Here is what fascinates me. Despite 800 years of suppression, the government had failed. Because Robin survived, the poneglyphs are indestructible, King had also survived, Zunisha remembers, and the Kozuki protected their knowledge. Every method of erasure had a flaw, and those flaws flaws compound over centuries, the government has been plugging holes in a dam that is about to burst, and Vegapunk's broadcast may be the final crack to the world learning the truth about all of this suppressed knowledge. This now brings us to the ancient kingdom whose name that we don't even know. The lack of a name may be central to understanding why the government fears them. Names have power in One Piece. Knowing something's true name means understanding its nature. The government erased the kingdom's name specifically because speaking it would convey information that they cannot control. Clover claimed that he knew the name and that it was tremendously important. The 5 elders had him shot before he could say it. In that moment, we learned something critical. The name itself is dangerous, not because it's magical, but because it would make the abstract concrete. The ancient kingdom is vague, almost mythological. A real name would transform the ancient kingdom into something that is historical and verifiable, thus enabling people to truly research into it and discuss about it. The ancient kingdom was technologically advanced beyond anything that exists today. Vegapunk, who is supposedly 500 years ahead of current science, examined their achievements and admitted that he couldn't replicate them. The Mother Flame we saw at Egghead is his incomplete copy of their original source. The Pacifista are his attempt to recreate their robotics. Everything Vegapunk builds is reverse engineering ancient kingdom technology from incomplete data. The kingdom created or possessed all 3 ancient weapons. Pluton is a battleship with devastating firepower. Poseidon is the ability to command sea kings, manifesting in a mermaid princess. Uranus remains mysterious, but it appears capable of erasing islands. These weapons were powerful and sophisticated enough to require specific conditions to activate and control them. The kingdom had global reach. Poneglyphs are scattered across the entire world, from Alabasta to Skypiea to Wano. The ancient kingdom or its allies placed these stones in locations that would survive for centuries. That requires either a massive empire or a vast network of allied nations. Either way, this wasn't a regional power. The ancient kingdom was something on a global scale. The kingdom also represented an ideology that the world government still fears 800 years later. Vegapunk described the Void Century as a clash of ideologies, not just armies. The ancient kingdom believed something and they stood for something that remains threatening even though the kingdom itself is long gone. That's why eliminating the survivors wasn't enough. The government has to prevent anyone from learning what the ancient kingdom believed because those ideas may spread across the world. Based upon how One Piece frames the will of D as inheritors of the ancient kingdom's will and how the government specifically targets D bloodlines, the ancient kingdom probably had the D as a part of its name or identity. The fact that D carriers are called enemies of the gods, who are the celestial dragons, suggests that they are in direct ideological opposition to them. The kingdom's destruction probably wasn't quick. If it was as powerful as it suggested to be, a 100-year war makes more sense than a swift defeat. The environmental damage from the ancient weapons raising sea levels by 200 meters indicates a prolonged, devastating war. The kingdom likely had significant racial diversity. The races that we see allied with the D clan today, which includes giants, minks, fishmen, Lunarians, and probably they were allied with the ancient kingdom during the Void Century. Their persecution after the Void Century War suggests punishment for choosing the wrong side. But here's what we can't know yet. Was the ancient kingdom actually righteous? Vegapunk said he couldn't determine who was right in the Void Century War. That ambiguity is intentional. Oda isn't giving us a simple good kingdom versus evil empire story here. Both sides probably believed that they were justified in what they were doing, and both sides maybe committed their own atrocities. The truth is likely more complicated than either side being purely heroic. Without a doubt, Joy Boy is the most important figure from the Void Century, but we know surprisingly little about him as a person. But here is what is confirmed. He existed 900 years ago during the Void Century. He was born in the ancient kingdom. He became the first pirate in history. He ate the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika. He made a promise to the ancient mermaid princess Poseidon involving the Noah. He failed to keep that promise. He left something at the final island of the Grand Line that made Roger laugh. Zunisha was his companion and committed a crime during this period. This is it. This is everything that the manga has explicitly confirmed about Joy Boy's life. Everything else, his personality, his specific goals, how he died, why he failed, all of this is interpretation based on indirect evidence. The title title of First Pirate is more significant than it sounds. Pirates in One Piece aren't just criminals, they represent freedom from the control of government. Being the first pirate means Joy Boy was the first person to reject the existing power structure and sail under his own flag. He invented the concept of living outside of government jurisdiction. Think about what this implies. Before Joy Boy, there was no such thing as piracy. Everyone presumably lived under the authority of kingdoms and rulers. Joy Boy's declaration of independence wasn't just a form of personal rebellion, it was creating a new category of human existence. People could choose to live outside of the system that rules them, so they are free from kings and laws. This is why the Roger Pirates and now the Straw Hats follow in a similar path. They are not just criminals evading arrest, they are living proof that you don't need the world government's permission to exist. Every pirate who refuses to bend the Celestial Dragon authority is unconsciously continuing what Joy Boy had started. Joy Boy had the very same fruit as Luffy. Zunisha explicitly stated Joy Boy has returned when Luffy awakened Gear 5. This is more than just a metaphor. The elephant who personally knew Joy Boy confirmed that this connection is true. The Nika fruit transforms the user into the Warrior of Liberation and the Sun God. These titles existed before Joy Boy, which means Nika was already a legend or a deity when Joy Boy ate the fruit. The Elbaph text mentioned the Sun God appearing in response to enslaved people's prayers, but the texts don't clarify if this is in reference to the power of the devil fruit or an actual deity. What we can confirm is that Joy Boy having this fruit meant that he could fight in the most ridiculous, cartoonish way imaginable while bringing smiles to people's faces. The fruit's awakening turns the user into something that defies physics, making them nearly impossible to predict or counter. Joy Boy probably seemed invincible to his enemies because nothing he did followed logical rules. This now brings us to the broken promise. Joy Boy's Poneglyph apology at Fishman Island is unique. It's the only Poneglyph that's explicitly personal rather than historical. Joy Boy didn't just record what happened, he expressed remorse for failing someone specific. The promise involved Noah, the massive ark at Fishman Island. The ship is large enough to hold the entire kingdom's population, and it was designed to be pulled by sea kings. The ancient mermaid princess was Poseidon, capable of commanding those sea kings. The logical conclusion is that Joy Boy promised to use Noah to bring fishmen to the surface where they could live under the sun. Why did he fail? Well, we don't know. Something happened that prevented him from fulfilling the promise. Maybe Joy Boy died before he could arrange it. Maybe the war's outcome made it impossible. Maybe the plan required conditions that no longer existed after the ancient kingdom fell. What matters is that Joy Boy considered this failure important enough to permanently record his apology into the Poneglyphs. He wanted future generations to know that he tried and failed, probably so whoever inherited his will could finish what he started. The promise wasn't abandoned, it was just delayed. Then we have the death of Joy Boy and his legacy. We have no confirmed details about how Joy Boy died exactly. The Elbaph texts say people killed the sun and became gods, which suggests Joy Boy was killed by the alliance that became the Celestial Dragons and the world government, but the specifics remain unknown. What we do know is that Joy Boy left something at Laugh Tale that explained everything. Roger found it, laughed at it, and called it a funny tale. Whatever Joy Boy left wasn't just information, it was presented in a way that Roger found both tragic and hilarious. That combination of emotions suggests Joy Boy's personality shines through even 800 years later. The too early comment is crucial. Roger understood what Joy Boy wanted accomplished. He realized that it couldn't be done yet, and it triggered the Great Pirate Era to ensure someone would eventually arrive at the right time. Joy Boy planned for failure. He knew his faction might lose, so he created a backup plan that would activate centuries later. It's hard to speak about Joy Boy without mentioning Emu, the tyrant in the shadows. Everything that we know about Emu comes from post-Reverie revelations, which means this information is relatively recent for One Piece readers. Emu's existence wasn't even hinted at until chapter 906. This delay was intentional on Oda's part, as it needed us to accept the world government structure before revealing that it was all a lie. Imu sits on the empty throne, despite the throne being symbolic of equality among nations, so nobody should really be sitting on it. The 5 elders in fact bow to Imu and take orders directly from it. Imu has been alive since at least the God Valley incident 38 years ago, and likely much longer. Imu comes from the Nerona family, one of the 20 founding kingdoms. Imu can transform others into demons through something called Domi Reversi. Imu personally possesses or controls the ancient weapon Uranus. Imu is observed with certain figures from history, particularly Nefertari Lily and apparently Davy D. Jones. So the throne room in Pangaea Castle contains 20 swords stuck in the ground, representing the 20 founding families. The empty throne sits above them, and according to official history, no one ever sits on it. This symbolizes that no single person rules the world. All nations are equal under the world government. Imu's existence makes this ceremony a farce. There is in fact a single ruler, someone who makes decisions for the entire world. The equality is a lie. The world government functions as a dictatorship that is disguised as a coalition. What's brilliant about this deception is how long it has lasted for. For 800 years, even most celestial dragons probably believed that the throne was empty. Imu operates in such secrecy that Saint Charlos had no idea that they existed. The 5 elders are the only confirmed people who know the truth, which means almost everyone in the government structure genuinely believes that they serve a system of shared power. During God Valley, Imu demonstrated the ability to transform Roxy Zebek into a demon controlled by Imu's will. This technique forces the victim to act against their own desires while remaining conscious of what they are doing. Rox cried while attacking his own family because he could see what he was doing but couldn't stop. This power recontextualizes the entire Void Century. If Imu could turn enemies into puppets, how many of the ancient kingdoms' defeats were caused by their own people being corrupted? How many allies turned traitor not by choice but by force? The psychological horror of watching your friends transform into enemies would devastate morale faster than any battlefield loss. The technique also explains how a seemingly weaker alliance could defeat a technologically superior kingdom. Superior weapons don't matter if the people controlling them get turned against you. The ancient weapons in the ancient kingdom's hands could be turned against the ancient kingdom itself. Imu is also obsessed with Nefertari Lily. Imu keeps a portrait of Lily in the garden and has a wanted poster for her descendant Vivi. This obsession spans 800 years, suggesting Lily did something that Imu still hasn't forgiven. We know Lily was one of the 20 monarchs who founded the world government. We know she made a mistake that caused the Poneglyphs to scatter worldwide instead of being collected. We know that she disappeared before returning to Alabasta and was erased from official records. The logical inference is that Lily was supposed to help destroy the Poneglyphs, realized what the alliance actually represented, and deliberately scattered the Poneglyphs in order to preserve the truth. She betrayed the 20 kingdoms at a crucial moment, ensuring that their victory would be incomplete. Imu has spent 8 centuries hunting D-carriers, partly as revenge for what Lily's betrayal enabled. Imu's destruction of the Leluzia kingdom demonstrated Uranus in action. A flying weapon strikes from above, creating a massive hole in the ocean and raising global sea levels. Vegapunk confirmed this is the same weapon that was used during the Void Century. Imu having Uranus means the ancient kingdom lost control of at least one weapon. Either it was captured during the war, or it was never in the ancient kingdom's hands to begin with. Either way, Imu now possesses the power to recreate the Void Century flood whenever they choose to. York being shown to produce more mother flames for Imu suggests that systematic attacks are coming. Leluzia was a test run. Imu is preparing to flood the world again, it seems, and this time with full knowledge of what the weapon can do and complete control over who survives. Vegapunk's broadcast revealed that sea levels rose by 200 meters. It's a measurable geological fact that anyone in the One Piece world can verify. 200 meters is insane. This isn't flooding, it's drowning. Any coastal city below that elevation is gone. Most islands that we see in One Piece are relatively small, again suggesting that they are the mountaintops of much larger land masses. The actual continents themselves are underwater. Vegapunk explicitly ruled out that this was done by natural causes. He considered climate change, volcanic activity, tectonic shifts, meteor impacts, every possible explanation. None of them could account for 200 meters to rise in a century. The conclusion is unavoidable. Someone did this deliberately using the ancient weapons. The manga hasn't stated stated this directly, but the implications of this are horrific. If continents existed 1,000 years ago and now only mountaintops remain above water, then it means billions of people probably drowned. Entire civilizations vanished beneath the waves. The human cost of the Void Century wasn't just the war casualties, it was everyone who lived at lower elevations when the water came. This changes how we understand the conflict. The 20 kingdoms didn't just defeat the ancient kingdom militarily, they committed genocide on a scale that makes the Buster Call look merciful. The flood wasn't collateral damage, it was the weapon itself. Wano's geography finally makes sense with all of this context. The country is surrounded by massive walls that turned it into a water-filled bowl. Rain accumulated over centuries, flooding everything below the walls while keeping the mountaintop plateaus dry. Why build these walls? Well, because Wano was protecting itself from a flood that already happened, or they knew that it was coming. The walls were not made to isolate Wano from the world, they were actually there to ensure its survival. Ancient Wano probably existed at normal sea level, but the Kozuki erected barriers knowing the water would rise. When it did, Wano's natural mountains kept them above the flood, while the walls prevented tsunamis and storm surges from devastating what had remained. Pluton being sealed beneath Wano connects to this too. The ancient weapon is locked underwater, protected by both the flood that surrounds it and the walls that hides its location. Opening Wano's borders means breaking the walls and draining the water, which exposes Pluton. The Kozuki chose to remain isolated for 800 years rather than risk the weapon falling into the wrong hands. Then we have the depth of Fishman Island, which exists 10,000 meters underwater. That's not close to the surface, it's deep oceanic trench territory. The fishermen and merfolk retreated there because it was the only place sunlight reached, thanks to the Sunlight Tree Eve's roots. If fishmen were originally surface dwellers, forced down by discrimination, the Void Century flood would have trapped them. Raising sea levels mean that surface access becomes even more dangerous. The Noah being built to bring everyone back up suggests Joy Boy planned to reverse the isolation, but his failure meant 800 years of imprisonment at the ocean floor. The red line is too convenient to be natural too. It's a perfectly straight continent that circles the entire planet, dividing it into exact halves. It is uniform in height despite spanning thousands of miles through different climate zones. Reverse mountains water flowing upward violates physics. The Elbaph texts describe a hell flame serpent coiling around the world, bringing death. Giants call the red line the blood-stained snake. These aren't metaphors, the red line is the serpent. Whether it was artificially created or artificially modified, the red line's current form is the result of Void Century weapons being used. If the red line is artificial, that explains why Mary Jo sits at the top. The celestial dragons didn't just choose the highest point for symbolic reasons. They are at the one elevation which guarantees to survive any future flood. When Imu uses Uranus to raise sea levels again, the celestial dragons remain safe while everyone else drowns. The system was designed with this in mind from the very beginning, it seems. Then we have the Poneglyphs, where history has been inscribed into stone. They are the only information that we have about the Void Century that the world government couldn't destroy, and this failure haunts them to this day. The Kozuki clan of Wano created these indestructible stones using techniques that can't be replicated today. Each Poneglyph was carved with specific information, written in an ancient language almost nobody can read, and placed in locations meant to survive for centuries. 30 Poneglyphs exist in total, and they're divided into 3 categories. 9 historical Poneglyphs contain information about the Void Century. These tell the story that the world government wanted erased. We've seen these in Alabasta, Skypiea, Ohara, and in other locations. Each one contains part of the narrative, requiring all 9 to understand the complete picture. 4 road Poneglyphs mark coordinates. When you plot all 4 of the locations, the point where they intersect is Laugh-Tale. These are the most heavily guarded, with their locations being Zoa, Whole Cake Island formerly Wano, and one unknown location. Finding all 4 is the only way to reach the final island. The remaining 17 are informational Poneglyphs marking things like ancient weapon locations. The one in Fishman Island mentions Poseidon. The one in Alabasta references Pluton. These stones serve as waypoints rather than narrative devices. The ancient script on the Poneglyphs is intentionally difficult to read. The Kozuki created a language that requires years of study to master, ensuring casual observers couldn't read them even if they were discovered. This protected the information from both the world government and random pirates stumbling across stones. The scholars of Ohara spent decades learning to read the script. Their research was legal until they applied it to poneglyphs, at which point the government destroyed the entire island. The message was clear: this language can be studied academically, but actually reading the historical poneglyphs is death. Robin inherited this knowledge from her mother and the Ohara scholars. She's the only confirmed person alive who can fluently read the stones. Through the manga, hints that others with the voice of all things might be able to understand them through different means. So what is it that we've actually read? The Alabasta poneglyphs gave Pluton's location. The Skypiea poneglyph talked about Poseidon. The Fishman Island poneglyph described Joy Boy's failed promise. Zoe's road poneglyph is one of the 4 needed to find Laugh-Tale. That's all we've gotten direct translations for. The other poneglyphs remain unread from the reader's perspective. We know that they contain crucial information, but Oda hasn't revealed what most of them say. This is deliberately done. The full story can't be revealed until Luffy reaches Laugh-Tale and reads what Joy Boy left there. The poneglyphs matter now because they are being activated narratively. Robin's ability to read them becomes more crucial with each passing arc. The road poneglyphs are nearly collected. The historical poneglyphs have provided enough information that people like Vegapunk can make educated guesses about the Void Century. The government's worst nightmare is coming true. People are learning the truth despite 800 years of suppression. Vegapunk's broadcast means that millions now know that sea levels rose during the Void Century and that ancient weapons caused this to happen. The foundation of the government's historical narrative is cracking. If people start questioning one official story, then they'll start to question others. Then you have the D clan, the enemies of God. The will of D is simultaneously the most discussed and least understood element of the Void Century. We know that people with this initial are systematically persecuted. We know that they are called enemies of God by those who know the significance of the will of D. We know every major world-shaking event involves multiple D carriers, but we don't know what the D actually means. The D appears as a middle initial in names across unrelated families, like Monkey D. Luffy, Gold D. Roger, Podcast D. Rouge, Marshall D. Teach, Trafalgar D. Water Law. These people have no blood relation, but they share the initial. This suggests D isn't genetic but cultural or ideological. People with D tend to die smiling. Roger, Rouge, and Ace all smiled at their deaths. This isn't biological, it's philosophical. D carriers face death without fear because they believe their will survives them. The celestial dragons specifically fear D carriers. Children in Merijo are told D will eat them if they misbehave. This isn't random superstition. It's a memory of the ancient kingdom passed down through celestial dragon families. Rox D. Zebek claimed that his real name was Davy D. Zebek, making him a descendant of Davy D. Jones, who supposedly was king of the world 800 years ago. Emu violently denied Jones was ever king, suggesting Rox hit a nerve with this claim. Rosia Nante explained that in certain lands the D clan is called the natural enemy of God. This phrasing is specific. Since celestial dragons call themselves gods, D carriers are inherently opposed to world noble authority. This explains their systematic persecution. The government isn't hunting D carriers because they're criminals, they are eliminating them because their existence challenges the premise of the celestial dragon's superiority. If gods have natural enemies, then gods aren't absolute. The D represents this idea that world nobles can be opposed, which makes every D carrier a threat regardless of their actual actions. Then there's the will of D's connection to the ancient kingdom. The ancient kingdom almost certainly used the D as a part of its identity. The Elbaph text refers to people of the half moon, and a half moon is literally a D shape. This linguistic connection suggests that the D clan were citizens or allies of the ancient kingdom. After the kingdom fell, survivors scattered and went into hiding. They kept the D in their names as a way to pass down their heritage without explaining it openly. Children knew they had the D, they knew that it was important, but most families stopped teaching why. Over 800 years, the specific knowledge faded while the tradition persisted. It's important to note that not all D carriers are heroic. Blackbeard is proof that carrying the D doesn't make you righteous. Teach is selfish, cruel, and pursuing power for personal gain. He's not trying to overthrow the world government out of ideological conviction, he just wants to rule. evil. The D isn't a guarantee of moral character. This ambiguity is important because if all D carriers were automatically good, then the symbolism would be shallow. Instead, the D represents potential. It means you have the capacity to oppose the world government. But whether if you use that capacity heroically or selfishly, it's a personal choice. Roger and Blackbeard both have the D, but they are fundamentally different people. Rox's claim about Davy D. Jones being the former king of the world adds a new dimension to the D clan. It means that they weren't just associated with the ancient kingdom, they in fact ruled it. The government's obsession with eliminating D carriers would make even more sense if they are hunting the former royal bloodline, but Emu's denial is equally significant. It didn't ignore the claim or dismiss it as irrelevant. They furiously insisted Jones was never king. Either Emu is lying or Rox misunderstood his family history. Either way, the Davy family specifically seems connected to something Emu desperately wants hidden. Then there's the ancient weapons, the 3 ways to end the world. The ancient weapons are called ancient even during the Void Century, suggesting that they predate the war. Their names Pluton, Poseidon, Uranus come from gods, which may mean that they were created during the even older First World period described in the Elbaph text. Pluton is the battle ship capable of destroying islands. Tom built the Oro Jackson for Roger, but he possessed Pluton's blueprints, which he passed to Iceberg and Frankie. These blueprints weren't for building Pluton itself, they were instructions for creating a counter weapon if Pluton fell into the wrong hands. The actual Pluton has been in Wano for centuries, sealed beneath the flooded country. It's still functional and waiting. Momonosuke learning that opening Wano's borders means releasing Pluton suggests that the Kozuki intentionally trapped the ship when they closed the country. But why seal it? Well, it's because Pluton in the wrong hands could devastate the world. The Kozuki chose isolation over risking the weapon being stolen. This decision protected everyone outside of Wano while condemning Wano citizens to 800 years of closed borders. Then there is Poseidon, which isn't a weapon, it's a person, specifically a mermaid princess born every few centuries with the ability to communicate with and command sea kings. The current Poseidon is Shirahoshi, who inherited the will from the ancient princess who lived during the Void Century. The sea kings themselves remember Joy Boy and are waiting for his return. When Shirahoshi was born, they commented that 2 kings would meet after centuries of waiting. They meant Shirahoshi and Luffy, Poseidon and the inheritor of Joy Boy. The Sea Kings have been conscious participants in this plan for over 800 years. Why is commanding Sea Kings a weapon though? Because Sea Kings are massive enough to destroy ships and islands. A mermaid princess who can control them commands an army of living destruction. But more importantly, Sea Kings can pull ships like the Noah. Poseidon isn't just destructive, she enables massive transportation that would otherwise be impossible. Uranus is the least explained weapon, but recent chapters gave us crucial information. Emu had used something powered by the Mother Flame to destroy Leluzia, creating a hole in the ocean and raising sea levels. This matches historical descriptions of Uranus. The weapon appears to strike from above, possibly from a flying ship or a satellite even. It creates massive holes in the ocean rather than traditional destruction. The aftermath raises sea levels globally, suggesting Uranus was responsible for the 200-meter rise during the Void Century. Emu controlling Uranus means the ancient kingdom lost this weapon at some point. Either it was captured during the war, or the 20 kingdoms built their own version using stolen Mother Flame technology. Either way, the government has possessed Uranus for centuries and is now using it again. The million-berry question is, why did the ancient kingdom create weapons of mass destruction? If they were technologically advanced and prosperous, what would they gain in building tools capable of drowning the world? Vegapunk's comment that he didn't know which side was right in the Void Century War suggests the weapons weren't purely made for defense. Maybe the ancient kingdom built them as deterrents, assuming nobody would attack if they could destroy the world in retaliation. Maybe they were research projects that got weaponized during the war. Maybe they had legitimate uses for the ancient weapons that got corrupted somewhere along the lines. Or maybe the ancient kingdom wasn't as righteous as we assume it to be. Advanced civilizations can be morally complicated. Building weapons of mass destruction is morally questionable regardless of intentions. The ancient kingdom created tools that could devastate the planet, and those tools were used to devastating effect. Whether if they were intended for that outcome is separate from the fact that they enabled it. This brings us to the Elbaph revelations that we got. The Harley texts from Elbaph are our newest source of Void Century information, and they are structured as a historical account spanning 3 eras. According to the Harley, the first world was technologically advanced with access to the Mother Flame. People built massive cities and covered the earth in structures. Slaves worked under a privileged class that monopolized the eternal flame. The sun god appeared in response to people's prayers for liberation. Then the earth god grew furious and unleashed the hell flame serpent, which enveloped the world in death and darkness. This is the calamity that ended the first world. Here's what we can reasonably infer. A civilization existed before the Void Century that achieved high technology, probably including the Mother Flame. Something catastrophic happened that destroyed the civilization and reset technological progress. The Void Century represents humanity rebuilding from that catastrophe. What we can't determine is how much is literal history versus religious interpretation. The Earth God and Hellflame Serpent might be metaphors for natural disasters, nuclear war, or actual supernatural entities. The Sun God might be the original Nika, a previous fruit user, or a mythological figure that the fruit was modeled after. The Harley text also describes the second world as the period when the forest god created devil fruits. The sun, Mother Flame, aggravated fires of war. The people of the Half Moon, the D-Clan, and people of the Moon, Lunarians, shared a dream of bringing the dawn. People killed the sun and became gods, referring to Joy Boy's death and the celestial dragons ascending to power. The sea god rampaged, flooding the world. The second world ended with massive destruction, just like the first world. This aligns with what we know from other sources. Devil fruits were created during or shortly before the Void Century. A war happened between the ancient kingdom associated with the D-Clan and the 20 kingdoms who became the celestial dragons. Sea levels rose by 200 meters. The correlation between the Harley text and confirmed information validates the text as historically grounded. The Harley text description of the third world is in fact part history and part prophecy. It describes the void left after the second world's destruction. It says inconvenienced shadows will remember the day of promise and listen to voices of the half-broken moon, which could be the D-Clan of the past leaving their messages in the Poneglyphs. The sun god will dance and laugh, leading towards the world's end. The sun will return, a new morning will arrive, and those men will finally meet again. The Harley is predicting that the sun god will return, which is Gear 5 Luffy, that a final conflict will happen, and that it will end differently than the previous 2 worlds. The quote, "those men will finally meet again," this is after 2 worlds of separation. It suggests reconciliation rather than destruction. The Harley texts are religious documents from the giant culture. They interpret history through a mythological lens, attributing events to gods and prophecy. While they contain historical truth, they're not objective records. We should treat them as ancient people trying to explain their world using the framework that was available to them. When they say the forest god created devil fruits, they might mean a specific person discovered the technique to create them. The giant's religious language doesn't invalidate the history that it explains, it just requires interpretation. This now brings us to the discovery of Roger and the problem of being too early. Everything that we know about Laugh-Tale comes from second-hand accounts. Roger reached the island, learned the truth, and made a decision based on what he had found. But we don't know what he actually saw because Oda hasn't revealed this to us. Roger and his crew reached Laugh-Tale 25 years before the current timeline. They found whatever Joy Boy left there. Roger laughed so hard that he named the island Laugh-Tale. The crew learned the complete history of the Void Century. Odin wrote it all down in his journal. Roger said that they arrived too early to do anything about what they had learned. He turned himself into the Marines and triggered the Great Pirate Era with his execution speech. He believed someone would eventually come who could accomplish what he couldn't. What did Roger mean that he couldn't act on what he had learned? The most likely explanation is timing. Certain conditions weren't met yet. The ancient weapons weren't in position. Poseidon, Shirahoshi wouldn't be born for another 10 years. The right people hadn't gathered. The world situation wasn't ready for whatever needed to happen. Roger's solution was brilliant. By announcing the One Piece and dying publicly, he ensured countless pirates would search for Laugh-Tale over the next decades. Eventually, someone would arrive at the perfect time with the right circumstances to finish what Joy Boy had started. This explains why Roger didn't just tell Whitebeard or Garp what he had learned. The information alone wasn't useful. It required specific timing and specific people to matter. Roger was gambling that the right people would would eventually find Laugh-Tale when conditions were correct. The laughter is very significant. Odin said Joy Boy left behind a funny tale. Roger found it so hilarious that it gave the island its name. This wasn't mockery, it was the kind of laughter that comes from absurdity, tragedy, and cosmic irony colliding. What could provoke that reaction? Probably learning that Joy Boy planned for his own faction's defeat, that he deliberately left a backup plan knowing that he'd lose, that he turned his failure into a setup for future success. The sheer audacity of planning for posthumous victory almost 800 years would be both tragic and hilarious. The Elbaph text described the worlds ending in catastrophe, but the third world is prophesied to end differently, with a reunion instead of separation. The pattern both previous worlds featured is advanced technology being misused, the mother flame causing conflict, massive environmental destruction, and society resetting after catastrophe. Emu is recreating these conditions right now. Uranus is being used to destroy islands. Sea levels are rising again. The mother flame has been rediscovered and weaponized. We're heading towards another world-ending catastrophe. The Harley prophecy suggests this time will be different. The sun god will return and lead towards world's end, but the sun will come back and a new morning will arrive. Those men will finally meet again after 2 worlds of separation. This implies success where Joy Boy failed. The difference, Luffy has advantages Joy Boy didn't have. He's gathered allies from every race and nation. He's gained trust of ancient weapon holders like Shirahoshi and Momonosuke. He appeared at the correct time when conditions allow for victory. Most importantly, people know the truth now. Vegapunk's broadcast means the world understands the government has been lying for 800 years. The Poneglyphs are being read. The historical suppression is failing. You can't fight an enemy you don't know exists, but now millions of people know the real enemy is the world government itself. The prophecy about bringing the dawn suggests fundamental change to the world order, not just defeating the world government, but creating something new. And this probably involves destroying the red line to unite the seas, fulfilling Joy Boy's promise to bring Fishman to the surface, using the ancient weapons for their intended purpose, revealing the complete truth about the Void Century globally, creating a world where the D-Clan's dream is realized. But what was that dream? We still don't know the specifics of it, but it involves freedom, equality, and breaking down the barriers that divide people. The D-Carriers have consistently opposed tyranny and authority. Their inherited will is probably about ensuring no one ever holds absolute power again. And there you have it. This is pretty much everything that we know about the Void Century accumulated over 25 years of One Piece's serialization. We are bound to learn even more new information as One Piece heads towards its endgame. But we have reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What are your thoughts about the Void Century? And what do you think about the information that is yet to be revealed, like the name of the ancient kingdom, how Joy Boy died, why the war started in the first place, and what the Will of D actually means? I look forward to reading all of your thoughts in the comments, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my next One Piece video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.